first, thank you so much for doing this interview with me. Before we even begin, I have to ask you because I do believe you're in Toronto.
Yeah.
Um, how have things been for you for the last, can we say now, 3 years with COVID? The way, things are opening and closing. As we speak, things are slowly starting to reopen, but not just the fact of this, this pandemic that's been going on, but everything that we've been seeing on social media and things like that. I mean, it's really affected a lot of people. This pandemic has affected jobs, lives in so many different ways. How have you been holding up and dealing with all of this?
Well, first, when it first hit it, honestly, I want to say it hit me hard. Like it really did. Wasn't used to being isolated at all. Like I like to get out there, I like to work, socialize. So that hit me, having to stay in my house. But gradually, as a writer, a creator, I was able to kind of turn that around and use it to, complete my fourth book. And I was able to start the my podcast, that TV show with Amanda on IG Live, Touch Live show. So I was able to turn it around and make it something beneficial.
Why was it important to have that show too? I mean, I've had a chance to watch it too. The one thing that I've seen that I think stood out for the show was the openness. People were able to speak their minds no matter what. And when I say speak their minds, other shows would not probably allow people to speak the way they do, as frank as they do. Your show does.
Yes, and that's what we wanted to do. Like when we saw the pandemic hit, a lot of small businesses were going to the ground. People that were there was a it was like the boom of the entrepreneurs prior to the pandemic. Everybody was starting their own businesses. A lot of entrepreneurs were coming out the woodworks. The pandemic hit, and a lot of people's businesses went right to the ground. So we kind of wanted to give a platform for artists and entrepreneurs and entertainers a voice, because everybody went to a halt and nobody kind of really figured out what to do. So we wanted to give them a space to speak their minds and talk and show their art and talk about their businesses to kind of keep people going. And talk about the pandemic, how it's affecting their mental health, addictions, whatever. And that's kind of why we gave them that space.
Now we're going to talk about something, a book that you've written, but right now, though, I want to talk a little bit about your history because being an author, what made you decide to be an author? What was it like for you growing up?
Oh, definitely. Well, I guess you could say I grew in a single parent home, and I definitely took to a more challenging path, if you could say. And I got into a lot of, problems. And, I ended up incarcerated at a young age. And that's kind of where I led my path to decide that um, I guess I found writing. I watched a lot of, experiences, drugs addiction, crime, whatever. And that's where I started to want to tell these stories, to give a voice to those that don't really have one, that are in marginalized communities and, aren't able to tell their stories. So from what I witnessed and from other people that I witnessed, I decided to start to tell those stories.
I want to get into that a little bit too. So, because this is what we're going to talk about, you said your fourth book, correct? You said?
Yes.
Okay. So, did you, and you probably already answered it, but I'm going to ask again, characters in your stories, are they characters of you and people that you've spoken with or people you've come in contact with and you've used their life stories in these stories?
Loosely, but I've kind of, manipulated it, obviously
Sure.
created different characters, blended it, done research, and just created characters all around.
What is the, how do I put this? Musicians love to sing. There are people who like us doing this. I love doing interviews. For you, when you're writing stories, what is it about it that you get from it that gives you, I guess, your representation?
That's a good question. For me, I started to realize that the stories that I was telling, they're bringing social awareness to those that don't maybe understand those experiences. For example, the last book, The Hidden Track, it's based on underage human trafficking, young girls that are being forced into a life of prostitution and they're under the age of 18. And I felt that, especially from a Canadian perspective, that content and story, I felt, for example, somebody from maybe a white privileged background may not understand that story, may not understand why a young girl that's biracial from North Preston would get forced into that life and why she would feel that's family and why she would want to do that and what's her background and her history and why she would be in love with her boyfriend and want to work for him and that dynamic. So I wanted to tell that story from a Canadian perspective, but I also wanted to showcase, the story of North Preston and how they were settlers and, their whole family dynamic and history. And I felt that to open the minds of the readers, but also to bring social awareness of how we grow in these environments, in these marginalized communities, and what we have to do to survive them. And I feel like the privileged in our society does not realize these stories and they need to realize them.
Let's go into this more too, because this is a fascinating story. Because, and correct me if I'm wrong, we're talking about black and indigenous, correct?
That's right.
Okay, and how did this story come about? I mean, you kind of explained it already, but I want to go a little bit deeper on this. Is this something that how do I put this? You're telling a true story in this story. Like, how did you come about this? How did you hear about this? And how did you form all of this? Like, I really want to get together on this because, especially even though we are talking about Black History Month, what we heard about what happened to the indigenous children and just things that have happened over the years that we all know about. It's only been recently now these stories are being told on a different level.
Well, what really happened, it wasn't, I kind of started to realize that there was a problem. Like I have a few nieces that are in university and they started to talk about on campus how, there's people that are coming on the campus that are recruiting young girls to get into prostitution. I was like, what? I didn't expect, yeah, like, and not even like Asian women that were coming on the campus and recruiting young girls to get into prostitution. And I was like, are you kidding me? So from that, I started to go online because I was like, I really want to write about prostitution. Like I've seen it, it's been around, it's been in from when I was young in the drug game. Like it just goes with it. There's women that are out there that are addicts that are prostituting, whatever. So I was like, it was always an interesting topic to me. So when I started to hear that, I got back to it. I was like, you know what? I need to write this book. I remember, Backpage went down, which is this internet that was, had a big lawsuit because they were promoting prostitution of young girls and they went down. And I was like, no, I really need to write this book. So I started to do a whole bunch of research and North Preston kept coming up like this big old gang, quote unquote, that law enforcement was targeting. And I was like, how is that possible when this was like this small Black Indigenous community? Why are you just targeting these Black people? How is that possible when this is a big $1 billion global industry? How are you just targeting this one small Black community of 4,000 people? So I just kept researching and researching. I'm like, this is impossible. So I went and I did more and more research on this community. And I was like, you know what? I need to tell a humanizing story of how these people got involved and why they did. How did they come from slavery to escaping to a free land of a community of 4,000 people? And now they have this target on their back. No. So I wanted to tell that story.
Is this one of those stories that have been swept under the rug like so many other stories have
Right.
been and not been talked about, even though this is part of our history?
That's right. And that's exactly what it is. Like these people are really and truly in my eyes heroes and they were able to feed themselves by any cost from the situations they were put in. And if you are going to try to label them as predators, who were preying on them first? That's my
Um,
question.
Emotionally, how tough was it for you to write this?
It took some time, took a lot of emotions, a lot of things that I was able to witness and read and learn about the people from North Preston that they
This
went through.
this sounds like an amazing story, and I'm glad that you were able to do this. You have a workshop coming up too, correct?
Yes, with confinement and contingent, it's called Find Your Voice, and it's for people that were previously federally incarcerated, and it's giving them a space where they can, create and use their previous experiences to write and in being a space with people. It's partnered with the FU Project, Kaya Publishing, and Museum Toronto.
Anything happened with a book tour for you?
Right now, because of COVID, we're so blocked. Like they're
Mm-hmm.
everything. So we're hoping that when the spring comes and now that things are starting to open up, we can get back. Like the books in Indigo, it's in Glad Day, another story, book story. So everybody's kind of on the halt because we don't know what's going on, but we're definitely praying that we can get back to doing some book tours and stuff like that.
What are you hoping that folks get from this story?
I definitely, the way I'm looking at it is I hope that they can get a humanizing understanding that if you put people in a position where they are prey and you're preying on them, they're going to do anything that they can survive to come out of it.
You
If you
speak the
give them no resources, what do you think they're going to do to survive?
You speak the truth. I want to say thank you so much for this interview. Thank you so much for putting this story together because, again, if there's anything that's been going on for the last couple of years, a lot of things are being opened up and truth is being put in people's faces. I think your book is definitely one of those truths that are finally being told. Thank you so much for this interview and looking forward to seeing your next writing being done and we get a chance to talk about this. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much for having me. It was an honor. Thank you for getting to speak with you. You're legendary.
Ah,
So thank you so much.
thank you.
Blessing.